And I trust everyone had a good summer and an opportunity, and I welcome everybody here to committee. So we'd like to call the meeting to order and call the meeting the 28th meeting of the Common Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The committee is meeting today to consider the study of expenditures related to the Office of the Governor General Secretary. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using a Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. And we will try and recognize, unfortunately, we lost a half hour, but we will try and be as close to 5:30 as possible. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that taking screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. I'd like to welcome the witnesses, and with that, we have opening statements, and we will go in order of starting with Ms. McIntyre, then Mr. Wheeler, and then Lieutenant General Kenny. And so with that said, welcome and thank you very much for coming. And with that, you have 5 minutes for an opening statement, and we'll start with Ms. McIntyre.
Good afternoon. Bon après-midi. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for this opportunity for me and my colleagues from Global Affairs and the Department of National Defence to assist the committee in its work today and its study of catering expenses related to official diplomatic travel on government aircraft. Je m'appelle Christine McIntyre et je suis la sous-secrétaire de la gouverneure.
My name is Christine McIntyre, and I'm the Deputy Secretary to the Governor General from the Office of the Secretary to the Governor General. In my role, I'm responsible for the teams that support the Governor General's constitutional, state, diplomatic, official, and public programs in Canada and abroad as well. The Governor-General undertakes official international travel only at the request and upon the recommendation of the Government of Canada in support of Canada's foreign policy objectives and to advance trade, investment, and partnership opportunities on behalf of Canada.
Travel with delegations, including parliamentarians from all parties, and leaders from public and private sectors who volunteer their time to help advance Canada's policy objectives, as well as the required logistical, security, and administrative staff, and sometimes members of the media. Une fois que le gouvernement approuve.
Once requested by the government, these visits are planned, coordinated, and implemented by the Office of Protocol at Global Affairs Canada, for which my colleague, the Chief of Protocol of Canada, is responsible. When the use of government aircraft is required for such visits, like the one to the Middle East in March 2022, the Office of Protocol request support from the Department of National Defence, which coordinates all details related to the aircraft, including the provision of in-flight catering, as my colleague, the commander of the RCAF, will explain.
Office of the Secretary to the Governor-General was not involved in the selection, provision, or contracting of in-flight catering, nor do we make any special requests in this regard. In May 2022, when the costs related to the catering provided on the flights during the Middle East visit were released, our office, like many Canadians and members, was very concerned. Stewardship of public funds and accountability are of the utmost importance to the Governor-General and her office. When we learned about this, following the response to an order paper question, we immediately reached out to our partners at Global Affairs and National Defence to confirm the costs involved, to review processes related to in-flight catering, and to evaluate and implement measures to improve efficiencies in a collaborative effort to strengthen accountability and to ensure maximum value for public funds. En examinant plus en détail le
In further reviewing the process and costs, our office learned from our partners that there are many variables that come into play, many of which my colleagues will describe in more detail. However, it was apparent to everyone that there were opportunities for improvement. Our office was encouraged that our partners were able to begin introducing efficiencies as soon as June 2022, and we worked with them, even while the review of the specifics of these flights and the overall process were still ongoing.
For the work they are doing on this file, and will do so on an ongoing basis. We have asked our partner departments to convene all offices involved in these flights on an ongoing basis to further identify ways to reduce costs and to maximize efficiencies wherever possible. My colleagues will be able to speak in more detail to the results of the review and the improved measures they have implemented to date. But I want to assure the Chair and the committee members that the Governor-General and her office are concerned about these costs. We remain committed to the sound stewardship of public funds and continue to work with partners to responsibly and efficiently facilitate the important work the Governor-General and delegations do in support of Canada and its foreign policy objectives. Nous ne pouvons pas changer le passé.
While we cannot change what happened in the past, we can help implement change going forward, and we remain committed to doing so.
When the opportunity arises, I would be pleased to answer any related questions the committee might have. Merci.
We'll now go, to Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honourable members. Monsieur, my name is Stuart Wheeler, and as Chief of Protocol of Canada, I'm pleased to join the committee alongside my colleagues to contribute to the important discussion taking place today to help clarify the processes that are used by our offices to fulfill our mandates and to reassure the members of the committee of our shared commitment to sound management of public funds. As the Chair and committee members may be aware, I volunteered to join my colleagues today in order to be able to share relevant information on the work that we all do together in these processes. En tant que chef du protocole du Canada,
As the Chief of Protocol of Canada, my office is responsible for managing and coordinating international visits and the protocol involved. And this includes high-level visits and connected activities, as well as visits by foreign diplomats.
of protocol coordinates and delivers travel and logistics for high-level visits either to Canada by visiting dignitaries or abroad by Canadian dignitaries. The international practice of exchanging high-level visits by heads of state and heads of government is a central element of diplomacy and international relations. The Governor-General plays an important role in this context by travelling abroad at the request of the government to advance specific Canadian foreign policy objectives. A cabinet minister traditionally forms part of the official delegation, which often includes all party groups of parliamentarians, as well as Canadians chosen based on their ability to contribute to advancing the themes and objectives of a visit. As an example of delegations, the Chair and committee members will have noted that a number of distinguished Canadians, including former Governors-General, Prime Ministers, National Indigenous leaders, and decorated representatives of national honours programs, travelled on our flight this past week to London to attend the state funeral of Her late Majesty the Queen. On our return, the Prime Minister of New Zealand joined us, engaging in important bilateral discussions as the leaders prepared for their engagements in New York at the United Nations this week. Parmi les principaux objectifs des visites internationales,
Among the main goals of international visits are to further Canada's foreign policy objectives and advance trade and investment. And we open doors at the highest levels in order to build the basis for investment, trade, and to open dialogue on major international challenges.
the Office of Protocol leads on the coordination of the many stakeholders involved in the execution of these visits. We ensure that partner departments have the information they require to deliver on their individual mandates. Our office does not task other departments, but rather ensures that decision points are relayed and knowledge and information is shared. Protocol arranges with the Royal Canadian Air Force for the use of government aircraft to facilitate transportation, and related to that, confirms the meals to be served based on the operational requirements of the visit program, i.e. are the flights taking place during mealtime, dietary restriction of passengers, etc. As high-level travel has resumed after this difficult period, this is an opportune time for us to redouble our continued efforts to work across departments with our partners to constantly evaluate ways that we can improve efficiencies, eliminate unnecessary expenses, and tailor our processes to deliver maximum return on the investment of public funds in these areas. Over the past months, our teams have already been engaged to look specifically at this particular area of our operations in order to improve our practices and identify efficiencies and potential savings. En terminant, j'aimerais...
In conclusion, I would like to highlight that the Governor General's visits result from the close cooperation between the Office of Protocol, the Global Affairs Canada, National Defence, and other partners. And we are always trying to increase opportunities for greater efficiency and to advance the priorities of Canada internationally. Thank you.
Answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. And now we'll go to Department of National Defence and Lieutenant General Kenny.
Good afternoon. Bon après-midi. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Lieutenant General, and I am the new commander of the RCAF. I'm responsible for Canadian airspace and the Air Force, in addition to air defense and other areas. The mission of the RCAF is to ensure safe travel for what we call high-level, very, very important persons, including the royal family, the Governor General, and the Prime Minister.
Provide VVIP transport. The RCF coordinates, as a service provider, all flight details to ensure the conduct of a safe and effective flight, including the provision of meal services in coordination with GAC Protocol Office. To fulfill this goal, the RCF is responsible for supplying pilots and crews, maintaining security and safety in flight, determining logistics with foreign countries and air traffic controls, pre-positioning aircraft if required, conducting fueling and maintenance, and finally working with Global Affairs to select menus and provide catering. As part of these flights, VVIPs are provided in-flight catering services for which the Royal Canadian Air Force works with Global Affairs Canada to confirm, but for which the RCAF is responsible for procuring and supplying. To do so, RCF flight stewards will liaise with airport catering services to identify meal options and procure the selected menu for the flight. In compliance with air safety regulations and to ensure the safety of members and crew, RCF flight stewards verify that all catering services meet Canadian food safety standards and that any food bought and brought onto the flight is safe for consumption. RCF flight stewards work with airport catering services to establish options for a meal, which are presented to Global Affairs Canada for review and approval. Once a menu is finalized and approved by Global Affairs Canada, the RCF procures the selected menu from the caterers. Catering costs are influenced by multiple factors, especially considering the episodic nature of VVIP travel, sometimes to airports where the RCF aircraft do not frequently travel. For example, the RCF may be restricted to using a sole catering service. This results when airports restrict catering services to a single catering provider, or when the Royal Canadian Air Force must use certain catering services abroad to ensure food meets Canadian health and safety standards. Additionally, foreign catering services may have restricted menu options, resulting in additional expenses if the desired menu is not readily available. Finally, catering costs also include additional back-end fees, which are common to all airline travel. This includes costs related to waste disposal, food delivery and handling, and international exchange rates. Ces frais supplémentaires sont inclus.
These additional costs are included in the catering expenses that are invoiced depending on the number of passengers. regardless of the flight, we take measures to try to reduce costs, but making sure that the flight is safe and adequate. There are costs that are involved that we are working to identify, and we are looking to find ways to reduce costs further while taking into account the realities of the flight requirements. Thank you. I'll be pleased to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, General. And I appreciate everything. As we look at the time, I recognize that we should be able to get through 3 rounds. We'll start our first round, which is 6-minute questions. First, starting with Mr. Paul Hoos, 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here to answer our questions. We've got an inflationary period, and many Canadians are finding it hard to put food on the table, so it's difficult to see these kinds of expenditures. I want to talk a little bit about the trip because on March 14, 15, 16, the Governor General was in London. She was a passenger on March 16th, but she couldn't have been in London and leaving Canada at the same time. Thank you for that question. The Governor General was already in London for her official conversation with Her Majesty, which had been delayed because of the pandemic. So the flight left Canada to pick up the Governor General in London and continue. So now we get into the question that was asked in the House. We had the flight with 30 people on the delegation and then another 20 or so. And we have a cost that's on average cost $976 per person. And then when we add all the other costs, it was about $3,000 per person. So we know now that Global Affairs Canada is responsible for the menu and the choice of meal. People had a tendency to point the finger at national defense, but in fact it's Global Affairs Canada. So we'd like to have, if possible, the menu that was proposed and that was used. Is that possible? Inaudible for the interpreter. It's possible to provide the menu.
Response is that one of the challenges that we have with global catering right now, specifically for airlines, is we have very limited choices as to who we can cater with. As you've heard, the locations that we're flying to are provided to us. The Air Force does have a responsibility to determine where we might stop along a route, but once locations is selected, we work with the local catering companies. In many cases, it's only a single catering company that's available to us. And because of that, they have a monopoly on costs from a catering perspective.
Mais ça, mon général, merci.
Thank you for that answer. I understand that quite well, but I want an explanation because if in Kuwait it costs 4 times as much as elsewhere, well, we can understand that if we have that information. We can understand that in some countries it costs more and some less. And if we get that information, that will satisfy us. But we'd like to know whether we were dealing with caviar and expensive champagne and what kind of meals are we talking about here? What does Global Affairs choose? We can see that there was a big difference between the trip to Europe and what the costs were in this case. So if we could have information in detail about the menu, that would be helpful to us. Regarding Global Affairs, it's a department Are you given a detailed list of what people want to eat? Or where does the Royal Canadian Air Force come into it? It just carries out the orders given by Global Affairs?
The menu, we go to the catering company, and to answer a little bit your earlier question, what we look at is effectively chicken, beef, fish, and so that's what the catering company will give to us. We'll then take that menu, we'll share it with Global Affairs Canada protocol to ensure that it meets their requirements. Once they're satisfied with the requirement, we then go back to the catering company and establish a contract and go ahead and purchase the food. There is a difference in cost depending on where we go as well.
OK. Dans ce voyage,
That specific trip, did the crew have the same menu as the passengers? Do you have a different menu for the crew? Thank you for that question.
The same menu selection as the rest of the passengers on board for two reasons. One, it's much easier logistically to coordinate because usually there's, as I mentioned, often only one service provider for that. But just to be clear, they will take whatever is remaining from the food selection. So they'll receive the same food, but it will be whatever is remaining after the main passengers have been served.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Hoos. We'll now go to Mr. Housefather for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So nice to see everybody again, and thank you to the three distinguished witnesses that are here with us today. I loved what Ms. McIntyre said, which is essentially, of course, we realize this doesn't make any sense, and the goal here today is to try to figure out what happened and how do we fix it going forward. Because as I calculate it, there were 46 people on the flight, and not all of them ate every meal, or not all of them were on all of the legs of the flight. There were 8 meals served. And the total cost was $80,367. And if you divide that by 46 people, you get $1,744 per person, or $218 for meal, which includes breakfast. So that seems just way out of line to most Canadians. And on the other hand, somehow 19 bottles of wine and 15 cans of beer cost only $113. Now, I think most Canadians would be pretty happy that 19 bottles of wine came to only $113. And if we were able to find a way to have the food match the wine, that would be fantastic. So can I just ask, to start with, obviously that doesn't make sense. So there must be all kinds of cost embedded in that $80,367 that have nothing to do with the cost of food. Can somebody sort of walk us through the percentage of the overall that has nothing to do with food? And what it comes and what the different things are?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take that question. So when we cater with a company, or when we contract with a catering company, the additional fees that come along beyond just the cost of the food are the handling and delivery fees, the storage fees, the cleaning fees, and then the food waste management. Those are additional costs. When we actually work with the catering company to determine which menu selections we want, in many cases we won't actually receive the cost estimate until we finalize the menu. It's just the way their industry works. So we determine a menu, we submit it, and then they give us the cost estimate at that point, which includes these additional fees I've just described to you.
At what point do you become aware of the costs? At what point in the process before the flights, presumably, are you aware of what the total meal costs or catering cost is estimated to be? And who becomes aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question, or Mr. Chair, for the question. I would say it depends on the flight. In some cases, we have very little notice for the planning of these events, and the cost is coming in. The estimates are coming in just prior to actual execution. Sometimes, as we're issuing the contract, when we have longer lead times, such as this particular flight, we can have earlier estimates. Each catering company does it differently. And in many cases, the cost estimates are not fully understood until further into the contracting process because of the way that they actually implement it. That information comes to the Royal Canadian Air Force for us to manage and to go ahead and pay the bill.
And I understand that. So let me come back to overall, what percentage of the $80,000 was not associated with food? What were those 4 extra costs, those 4 extra line items you mentioned? Is it 50%? Is it 75%? Or is it 10%? Like what of the balance of the costs relate to the food costs themselves?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The reality is we don't actually, the catering companies don't break that down for us. In fact, they don't necessarily break down the cost per menu either.
Okay.
So what we get is an overall cost. Some do provide more detail than others, but you don't actually get the actual cost breakdown of each of the things I've just described to you. So it's very difficult to provide. Some cases you get it, in some cases you don't.
I understand. So let's say in this case, because there were multiple different flight segments, so there were different countries and different caterers that had to be engaged, presumably because the airport had monopolies without those caterers. Did anybody look at the numbers and reject the initial proposal from the caterer and go back and negotiate? Were there negotiations involved, or were these flight segments always accepting the first price provided by the caterer?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. There is very little, actually really no negotiation in these cases, unfortunately, unless there is more than one caterer available to us, in which case we can then look and see which one is the best value for money. But as described, vast majority of them are single providers who then tell us the price, and there's no negotiation. I would say it's a little bit different than what you might see with airlines who are coming into the same location all the time, and they have established contracts that get them the best value for money.
Understood. But what about, for example, does anybody look at the price and say, oh my God, this is an astronomically high price for this small number of meals, and maybe we should look to the caterer and ask, maybe instead of ordering chicken, we should be ordering fish in this location because it's much cheaper? Is there any negotiation, for example, on that part, maybe by Global Affairs or anyone else?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So this is something that we need to work with GAC protocol. Specifically, how can we further reduce costs as we move forward? There is opportunity to do that, but I'll defer to my colleague as to how the menu selection is determined, but there is opportunities, I believe, to save costs.
If the chair admits, I'll maybe jump in and just explain. Gives me an opportunity to outline the process, I think, because people clearly have interest in understanding how those menus are arrived at. In collaboration with the RCAF, we establish a protocol once a visit has been approved and is being planned. We establish a meal plan for the entire visit. And that determines how many meals or snacks will be offered during the various legs. And those are based on the length of flights, the time of day, complementarity with the program. When we arrive, are we being fed at an event, or are we keeping staff in a flight for 8.5 hours and we have an obligation as an employer to feed them? Are we living up to sort of standard commercial airline practices for flights of similar durations? The RCAF then works with their flight suppliers or catering suppliers to then provide back available menus that would meet those types of meals. We don't send requests of this is what we must eat on this flight or this is what we must eat on that flight. We then review those. We look for things like redundancies. We reconfirm whether the program has changed in the interim, whether those are still the meals that we require. We, by then, perhaps have a bit more information on our delegation passengers. We might know about dietary restrictions or some specific meals that we need to supply. And over the period of 32 hours of flights and 6 legs and 8 meals, we try to provide some kind of variety for our passengers.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
But that's the extent of the...
I apologize for interrupting, and but perhaps as the questions come out, you might be able to add more as we go along. I appreciate that. I apologize. We now go to Ms. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Merci. Thank you. Thank you for being here this afternoon and answering our questions. All three mentioned at the outset when you spoke how this amount for the meals and the number of meals was surprise and was worrisome. Mr. Housefather talked about $80,000, then $1,700 per person, and so on. But an average of $218 per meal, that would represent groceries for a whole family for a week. So a lot of people react strongly to that. I certainly do. I needed food assistance in my life, and so to see that meals and snacks came up to $80,000 for a trip, that's more assistance than I ever got in my life. I'm not a very, very important person. I'm just an ordinary person, not a VVIP. So you can understand the kind of, wouldn't say anger, but deep questioning that comes up for people. It challenges their values. General Kenney has said that it isn't really possible to know how much of the cost comes from the food because there are all these other costs. Is that what you're saying? So if we ask you for a breakdown of the $80,000 to include delivery, storage, dealing with waste, safety, security, and so on, can you not give us that breakdown? Is that what I've understood correctly? Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman, through you. There are invoices that give us some amount of detail, but in other places we don't have very much detail, how much specific aspects cost. I know that it's a great deal of money for those for the catering.
That's why we're committed to make sure that we continue to look at how we can best achieve what we're doing, which is providing safe standard of food to those that are on our flights, while ensuring that we're doing so in the best price possible, recognizing that we go to areas where the cost of living is quite high in comparison to Canada, and therefore the prices are much higher than we would see potentially here in Canada.
Would it be possible to have a written list of details for those meals? You said it wouldn't be easy in some cases, but it might be possible in other cases. Could we have that detailed information? Because as my colleague was saying, if in Qatar things cost a great deal more, then we will know that. I know it isn't always possible to foresee or to have food brought aboard a lot in advance of the need because there's limited storage. And I know that we're not going to have peanut butter sandwiches for days on end. I certainly wouldn't suggest that. But if we knew that Qatar cost 2.5 times to as much in there as in Berlin or London, could it not be possible to bring the food aboard in London or Berlin rather than in Qatar? I don't have all of the information about how this works. Perhaps I could add a bit of information. We all agree that some aspects of the expenses involved in these flights are problematic, and this is what we have found. And so we have already started reviewing the processes to see how these high costs came about, how they were found to be acceptable, what were the factors, or what are the expectations of our clients, which perhaps can be clarified to help us. If I may, this isn't the first time that the costs have hit the front page. Why have the answers concerning the processes not been found already? For 10 or 15 years, we've heard about the expenses involved in Governor General's traveling. I respect what you have said, but why hasn't this happened before? Thank you for that question. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Change the way we're ordering our catering services, specifically with the amount that we order for the flights. So beyond working with Global Affairs Canada protocol to determine the type of menu selections, chicken, beef, vegetarian as an example, and the numbers of each one, we also work to make sure that we provide enough to cover the passengers that are on board and a bit of a contingency. That contingency specifically has been reduced drastically over the years, most recently in 2022, but also in 2019. So in 2019, we reduced the amount of meals we were buying, and then we just did a further reduction in June of 2022 following this flight on the number of meals we were buying, which does significantly reduce the cost overall for the catering that's provided on an aircraft.
Thank you, General. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes.
See all my colleagues. I hope you had a wonderful summer. It's nice to be on the back on the unceded lands of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin people, and I want to thank our guests for being here today and for your service. I also want to thank Ms. Vignola for putting forward this motion, which we strongly supported. We've seen the rising cost of living that many Canadians are struggling, to make ends meet. Food costs are going up. We've just seen 41-year high in inflation, 10.8% in food costs. Against this backdrop, sorry, I can't hear myself. If I could, it's understandable why many Canadians were concerned. They're not concerned; they're actually outraged when they hear about the in-flight catering expenses here on this trip for the Governor General's March 2022 visit and tour of the Middle East, and the shockingly high cost, the $218 a meal it's unacceptable. And I've had a number of constituents write to me today about this issue, and I really hope that we can get further transparency and some changes actually today. And so, maybe I'll start with you, Commander Kenny, and again, congratulations on your promotion. Really grateful again for your service. Maybe you can talk about, is a budget for in-flight catering expenses established in advance on trips on Airbus and Challenger flights? And if so, can you talk about what the budget was for the Governor General's March 22 tour of the Middle East?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do not have a set budget for a specific flight. We are provided operations and maintenance funding throughout the year to cover VVIP travel, but we don't specifically have funds allocated for each flight.
Can you talk about what checks and balances are in place for when in-flight catering expenses are beyond the norm, or what's been budgeted? I guess I'm concerned that if information regarding the catering costs for this trip hadn't been made public because of an order paper questioned by Mr. Barrett, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about the appropriateness of these expenses or how to improve practices moving forward.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So right now, this is coordinated between the flight steward lead on the particular flight, working with Global Affairs Canada protocol to determine the menu set and actually do the catering. We are absolutely committed to changing this to make sure that it reflects the expectations of Canadians and those that we're serving on our flights. And I strongly believe that we will be able to further reduce costs as we move forward.
Okay, that's really good to hear. My next question is actually, has there been a thorough review of the catering expenses from this trip? And maybe what areas have you identified where expenses could have been reduced, and if so, where were those possible savings and where were they identified?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the savings that was identified is in terms of the contingency meals that are purchased for the flight. which is above and beyond the total number of people on the flight. So reducing that specifically is one of the savings that has been implemented. There is also certain locations that we know are much more expensive than others. Having said that, we were told, working with Global Affairs Canada, exactly what locations we're going to, and I would allow my colleague to speak to why we why they would pick certain locations.
If the chair would allow, I'm happy to jump in and add a little bit of detail there on the question of selection of locations. Often when we are traveling as the guest to a host nation will be dictated what airport we need to land in, and in consultation with public safety and other partners here in Ottawa, we and the Air Force, of course, we identify a flight routing, and there may be some limitations on countries in which or places in which we can land to refuel, for example. So that explains a little bit the limitations sometimes on which airports. But I think what's really important is our members of our teams have been working together since this episode, and we recognize that there are problematic elements of this process. And what we're trying to do now is instill a no-nonsense environment where if there are exorbitant costs, they need to be flagged. They need to be flagged at the appropriate moment so we can make alternate choices or forgo things that might have been part of the standard operating elements that have always been included in packages. And we're happy to make those choices, and we look forward to being able to deliver cost savings.
I guess what I'm looking for is, what changes and practices have actually been implemented since March 2022, and to ensure that there's responsible stewardship of public funds and ways to improve accountability so that it doesn't require an order paper question, so that Canadians know what expenses are being done, what changes are being done, what is going to be moving forward, the transparency to Canadians to help them see that this isn't going to happen again.
Well, I would just mention again that we are identifying cost savings. One of the examples that the General gave was this idea of contingencies, and to help people understand, it's the standard operating procedure when you're on an international commercial flight is that you'd be given a choice between two meals, chicken or fish. Would you like chicken or fish? And ordering enough meals to make sure that you've got a balance of those and you allow that choice is an art. It's an art that the caterers and the steward work through in order to have a balance between service and overage or waste. As the General mentioned, the number of contingency meals that had been ordered in the past have been strictly reduced over the last few years. We've now decided, as one of the outcomes of the discussions that we've undertaken since this became clear to us, is to forego choice altogether. So on the recent trip to London, there were no choices, and that reduces the number that we have to order because everybody's eating the same. So that's one, obviously not dietary restrictions. We still, but we were able to identify those things in advance and make sure that we've got a robust system of checks and flags so that we're able to work together and avoid these exorbitant costs.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler, and thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to the second round, and starting with Mr. McCauley, 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, some of the committee members have asked for copies of the menus and that. There would have been provided a banquet event order or a catering event order for that. Can you confirm, please, that you'll provide that to this committee as soon as possible, please, for this flight or for this issue? Thank you. What was the reason behind the difference between the $93,000 in the order paper question and the revision?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and it's a great question. So initially, when we responded to the order paper question, the cost that came out was $93,117.89. What we didn't specify, which we should have, was based on an estimate, based on what we understood at the time from the catering companies to be the cost. When we received the invoices.
So when we get these banquet event orders, are they going to reflect $93,000? Like,
No, so each
That's quite a
location,
significant
each
change.
caterer that we worked with had a cost. We had estimates,
would you
and then
provide us with the estimates then and the final bill and the menus, please, to the committee?
we can. Once we looked through it and we got the final invoices, the total cost
you-
turned out to be
Okay,
80,000.
Will you provide us, please, with those estimates, the contracts, and the menus, please, for all the flights in question?
We'll take it on in order to look into those, providing what we have for
I'm
you.
not asking you to look into it. Will you provide it for us, please?
We'll take it to
Thank
look
you.
at, yep, or to
Okay.
provide.
I think I have the will of the committee to ask that you provide it for us. Are there any other perhaps hidden costs that haven't been part of that 80,000 that you've discovered later or haven't been included in that 80,000? Or is
So,
that the drop dead final cost? There's nothing else?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a great question. So there's additional costs beyond catering for our flights. Specifically, there's costs for airport taxes, administrative fees, security charges, and local
Specifically
taxes.
regarding the fuel or the catering for that flight?
When we go to certain thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. When we go to certain airports, there's charges for landing fees, airport taxes that are
Related
not
to the catering or the
No,
fuel?
they're separate from the catering
Okay,
charges.
so there's no other charges that are going to pop up?
So the charges of 80,367 for the catering costs hold, which was a further update that we gave in June, not part of the original order paper question. But there is additional cost beyond that, just to be clear, outside of catering
Okay.
that we have.
Okay. What was the cost per person for the recent trip that the Prime Minister and the GG took to London and then to New York?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I do not know what the cost was
Would you
per
provide
person.
that for us and the contracts and the menus? When you talk about a selection of chicken and beef, I know on Air Canada you have a choice of stringy chicken or stringy tasteless chicken. Often it's the same item. Is it beef or are you offering a fillet, a choice cut of beef? Like what is exactly being chosen? Because the reason I ask, I'm kind of gobsmacked, and I'm trying to be polite here, but I'm gobsmacked that it's 2022, there's dozens of people, I'm sure, working on this, that $218 just seems to be, that's okay. I get asked, how did this happen? I mean, we hear Mr. Lieutenant General Kenny talking about changing things in 2019, addressing the contingency in 2019, unless I heard that wrong. But now it's 2022 and we're hearing, well, we're going to address the contingency. I don't have a lot of faith. We keep hearing, well, we're reviewing. We've been reviewing for years. I don't have a lot of faith that, and Mr. Johns was getting at it, that it's actually going to get done. We hear a lot of reviewing. Would you be able to maybe put in writing to this committee actual firm steps you're taking to address the costs?
Absolutely. I think to answer your question around the style of meals, standard commercial airline practice meals is what we're ordering, in line with health and safety and travel regulations, as the general mentioned. But we are looking at concrete savings, and we'd be happy to make that available to the committee.
40 seconds. Oh, 40 seconds. The previous week to the GG's trip to the Middle East, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and 58 other people went on a trip to London, Poland, various stops, 8 stops, 60 people, and the cost was about 2/3. So we had about 50% more traveling and yet 2/3 less cost for that trip for catering. Like, how do we end up with such a massive discrepancy between caring for the Prime Minister? So it's not like it's 60 members of OGGO. This, we're talking top echelon people. Like, how do we end up with such a massive difference? And,
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I don't have the specifics of those costs with me.
it's on the same order paper. Maybe you can let us know.
What I can say is where we go to really dictates the price. So, for example, Qatar, UAE, the catering costs are quite high. And there's certain locations.
I think we're out, but I'll come back the next time. Thanks.
And if there's further, documentation that you'd like to provide, if you provide that to the clerk, and the clerk will distribute that amongst the committee members. Greatly appreciated. Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Baines for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests for joining us today. My question is to Mr. Wheeler. Earlier, the Lieutenant General Kenny mentioned things like monopolies in certain countries that drive up the cost. Were there other unique or unusual restrictions or limitations that contributed to the cost of catering services in this situation?
I think on this flight on this visit there were a number of complexities given the number of countries, the number of stops, and we would have to go back and look at the specific airports. But I can say that that the discussions with host countries, and in this case the host countries that we visited, did have an impact on which airports that were chosen for our landings in the host countries, and that related to, for example, in the UAE, landing with a government aircraft at a time when the UAE was hosting the final month of the World Expo. The UAE government requested that we land at a specific government aircraft or government airport versus the main commercial one, which is often the case when we're flying government aircraft into host countries for a hosted event by a foreign country.
So is like a government airport versus a commercial airport, are the costs different? Like a government airport, the landing fees are more than like a commercial one?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So different in each situation, but often these are locations where there's very limited catering services. In other words, there might only be one caterer available to us. And they don't, they're not used to working with airlines as we would see in a more normal civilian airport, where the cost could be lower because they have a greater quantity that they're providing. So the location is selected by GAC in coordination with the host country, of course, for those reasons to include security. But ultimately, what's available there is often, there's less choice when it comes to the actual caterers that are available to us.
Okay, moving on to how does the GAC protocol determine the appropriate standards that in-flight catering should meet? You know, for instance, if we have Royal VVIP persons that are flying on RCAF aircraft, how would GAC determine the appropriate standards?
We work with the Air Force to request a meal plan that is in line with the health and safety travel regulations, how long the flight is, how many meals would be offered, as I mentioned, and meals are arranged aligned with standard commercial airline practices for flights of the same duration. Global Affairs Protocol is not involved in visits of the royal family to Canada. We are involved only with foreign dignitaries, and of course the royal family is the Canadian royal family. So that's not one where we would be involved. The Department of Canadian Heritage coordinates the royal tours. But I think the important thing is that we work very closely with the Royal Canadian Air Force to determine what is the appropriate number of meals, what kinds of meals do we need, how do they complement the program that we have, or are they in line with the program that we have, and then we review those and confirm the final menus based on the selections which have been able to be had from catering companies.
Okay, so what is the GAC protocol office's role in this process then? How do they act between an RCAF, a VVIP office to determine catering choices? Where does that directive sort of come from?
As I mentioned earlier, our job is to work with our partners, whether it be the Governor General's Office, the Royal Canadian Air Force, to ensure that there are appropriate meals provided during the visit. As I mentioned before, our job is not to task, but to share information. We evaluate the menu plan. We look at the options that are being put forward. We make sure that still fits with the needs of the people that are flying in terms of special meals, etc. And in this case, for example, I would say it's useful to know perhaps that the Office of Protocol at no time in the process does the Governor General herself personally review menus. The only review by the Office of the Secretary of the Governor General for menus for her flights is actually done as a point of information and in order to avail ourselves of the free in-house or the in-house translation expertise that Rideau Hall has when it comes to food, so that we can meet our obligations under the Official Languages Act to present a bilingual menu to our passengers. But that consultation with the Office of the Governor General is for information purposes. It's the Office of Protocol that makes the choices on for menu selections in conjunction with the Air Force and the options that are provided by the catering companies.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. And now we will go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that not only the menus will be provided to the committee, but also the breakdown of the expenses as I requested earlier. Of course, as far as they are able to do so, because I understand that some caterers don't provide that breakdown, but whatever is available, we would like to receive that. Lieutenant General Kenny, we've had groups that have gone to Kuwait, and they have had to eat during their flights as well. They have been a part of missions. So I'm just wondering whether you could give us the price. Mr. Chairman, I don't have the prices for those flight meals. Do our members, when they are on those missions, have meals that cost less than those of the Governor General and her delegation? It is not always the same type of meal that is provided, but I think our soldiers should be VIPs as well, or even VVIPs, because we're all going the same place, and people should get the same kinds of meals, especially people like our soldiers that are going over there. They should have the same kinds of meals as the Governor General. I don't know what we call the group, the 29 people that accompanied her. If that delegation receives a certain kind of meal, then everyone else should. One last question, because I don't have much time. You have said that there were snacks. What kinds of snacks? How many snacks were there, and what were the costs of those? Thank you for that question. There were some snacks
on the flights. The breakdown of the cost for the snacks, yep. I do not have specifically with me.
Okay.
At this time.
Is it possible to have those costs?
Committee to see the cost for the catering, which is what Whether it actually breaks down the cost of the snacks, I do not know, though.
Okay. If I may, just to demystify the amount of the meals, I was one of the passengers on those flights. The meals that we were given are the types of meal that you would get on a commercial flight. It was not something that was we didn't think it was going to be expected as high as that. When we saw the menu, we wonder whether people even need to eat on certain flights. We will have to look at everything, and this process is being reviewed. We will be able to make some decisions. So that you are asking excellent questions, and we have to put all options on the table in order to save costs. And our office is certainly in support of any measures. I think those reviews need to keep going. Yes, I completely agree.
Much. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess just following that, I mean, $218, average for a meal. Is there any meals that stood out that were like unexpected, that were in the hundreds of dollars? Or, I think moving forward, are you going to learn and decide like, well, this is outrageous, clearly. I'm not saying that you should eat KD, but, and I think it would be good for us to know what are our soldiers, what are the costs of the meals for our soldiers that are going overseas? Because as Ms. Vignola spelled out, these are the people putting their lives on the line. Yeah. And, we're spending this much money on a delegation. I guess, Ms. McIntyre, you can tell me about the objectives of the Governor General's trip and about what outcomes were achieved. I think that would be important for us to understand as well, given the cost of this trip.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question, and I will give an overview, and then I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Wheeler, to add to this, as these are the objectives of the government. But in fact, in keeping with what Madame Vignola, excuse-moi, dit, la gouvernance.
In keeping with what Ms. Vignola said,
one of the reasons we were going to this region, and one of the things that she did while she was there, was go and visit our troops in Kuwait and in Qatar, to accompany them, to see what they were doing, to offer them support, to recognize them. We were also going to these countries as a gesture of thanks to these countries who helped Canada evacuate Canadians from Afghanistan during the crisis. We were there to build relationships with people that support this very important part of in our foreign policy. And these questions, the costs were really shocking to all of us. We had eggs. We had omelets.
Okay. I do appreciate that. And I guess in terms of the menu options that were presented by the Royal Canadian Air Force, were any of them rejected by Global Affairs? And if so, what was the basis of rejecting the menus as presented? And did the selection of alternative options result in increased costs?
I think I could lead on that question to say that there's always a back and forth between the flight steward and my team, looking at the options that have been put forward, and there may have been changes to some elements, but again, looking at redundancies, looking at variety during the trip. Are we going to have the same thing for breakfast twice in a row? Are we going to have different things? Are we having chicken, fish, pork? But the on the question of the importance of the trip, if you allow me, I would just add that not only was the visit to the troops and the high-level engagement with the senior leadership of those countries important to express Canada's thanks and appreciation for everything they've done for our military platform that we use in that region. But also would remind the committee that we were at a time reinforcing the importance of regional peace and security in the context of the crisis in Ukraine. There were important messages to be
And just to wrap, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, just one comment. You know, $218 a meal is about the average cost of the Port Alberni food truck that goes out and feeds over 100 homeless people a night where I live. And I just want to make that sure that that's on record, because that's what we have to be thinking about.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
I'm going to share a bit of my time with my colleague, Mr. Redekop. Just quickly, Mr. Kenny, would you, Lieutenant General Kenny, would you be able to provide us with the flight length of each of the trips involved that we're discussing?
Thank you for the question, Mr.
Oh, no,
Chair.
just to the committee, not right now.
Okay.
Just when you have time. Who in Global Affairs would have signed off on the menu? Because I think we heard at the opening statements, Global Affairs makes the final, Global Affairs signs off. So who specifically would have done that? And would they have seen the price?
The final discussion on menus is a conversation back and forth. As we mentioned, it would be a member of my team, and no, they would not see the price at that time.
Okay.
Because
are they going to see the price in the future? Like,
as I mentioned,
how are we fixing
that
this
is
going forward so someone
absolutely
says, "Oh my Lord, this is going to get us dragged in front of committee"?
Yes,
and a rather unpleasant OGGO.
We would be always happy to come back and see the committee, but I think you're absolutely right, sir. That what we need is to have an environment between the teams where those things are being flagged to us.
My question back then to John O'Kinney is: someone on your side saying to Global Affairs, "Heads up, this is all you're getting." Like, good Lord, it's $400 for stringy Air Canada chicken, beware? Or does it just go over and everyone just shrugs because it's the taxpayers?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. We're very aware of the use of public funds and want to make sure that we're fiscal stewards of that. I would say, so the coordination that goes on with Global Affairs Canada protocol specifically is to the contents of the menu. Once that's passed to us, we will then go ahead and work with the caterer. We don't, and in many cases, will not know the cost until after that menu is selected, and then we go back to the caterer, which is when we get the cost. They don't, many of these catering companies don't actually provide us the breakdown of costs until you select the menu. So that's one of the challenges that we're having right now about trying to get ahead and making sure we're getting best value.
What airports tell you we're not telling you the price until after you've chosen something? Having been in that business has actually catered to airlines for decades. I've never seen a process where we'll let you know the price after you've chosen.
Yeah, I guess just a bit more clarity on the process then, if I can, Mr. Chair. So we'll work with Global Affairs Canada protocol, who will tell us, based on this flight leg, we are looking for a breakfast and a lunch. Once we get that information, we go to whatever catering company that we can go to. Right. If we have multiple options, we'll do that. We'll say we need menus for a breakfast and a lunch. We will then get that information and we'll pass it to Global Affairs Canada protocol, who will look at it to make sure that it meets the requirements.
Who somewhere is the well, I don't want to say gatekeeper, who somewhere looks at it and says, we're not paying $218 for eggs, unless they're perhaps dodo eggs. Like, who's saying that? Like, who has that opportunity to say, stop, we're not doing that?
So one of the things, so this is one of the things that we're looking at, obviously, based on what's come to light and why we're here today. There is changes that absolutely need to be made in terms of the oversight and how we determine best value for what we're trying to do for the mission. And this is something that we're working with closely to ensure, and so we have already made a change, which is a change to contingency percentage that we're purchasing.
I'm going to just let Mr. Redekop have it time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to pick up right on that point of contingencies. You've mentioned that there were contingencies. You eliminated them, part of them in 2019, and now again. Can you tell us a bit more about that? When you had, the beef, chicken, pork options, how much contingency did you actually have? If you had, say, 30 people on board, did you have 35 meals? Like, what was typical contingencies? And what would happen to those excess meals once the flights were completed?
So the contingency percentage, I don't actually have the exact number of meals that were purchased for each flight and the contingency amount. what I can tell you is, so when you go on an airline right now, they'll go often in order, and the first person you ask the two choices, that they get what they want, and then as they go down, they run out of a specific meal set. And so that's the contingency where you have that's offered to more people than not, and that's what we've reduced specifically.
Could you provide the committee with that information? What was the reduction? What was the contingency in 2019? What did you reduce it to? And then what did you reduce it to now?
Yeah, we can look into that.
Just provide that. That would be great. I also am wondering if we were to go to just a military flight where you're flying officers or military people on those types of planes, would we find the same sorts of situations if we were to do an order paper question on those types of things?
On flights with just military, specifically? So often with the military flights, what happens is we fly through military airports, and we get our food often from military facilities, which have a much different cost.
Okay, thank you. So, and one maybe last question here for Mr. Wheeler. You mentioned that the protocol office was doing a review. You were going to have maybe some new procedures and some new policies. Could you give us a little bit of a timeline on that, and then could you provide that review actually to the committee so that we could see the results of that?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take that on board. We are constantly working together, and these people work together all the time. What we're asking our teams to do is to work in between the actual operational working on a specific visit to actually sit down and say, okay, what isn't working here? Let's look at the numbers that now that we've seen those line numbers and say, well, why is this part of the standard operating procedure? Nobody asks for this. Why is that part of it? Can we eliminate that in the future? Can we decide that we're going to set up some flags so that there are so flags go up and then a question comes over and we make an alternate choice? That's what we're hoping, is to instill that kind of rigor. And I think we're hoping it'll be an ongoing process and it isn't a kind of one-stop review and then it's over. We want this to be the new practice.
So
Thank you.
Can you provide that review to us, though?
Sorry. Yeah, if you could provide that, thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Johari for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming today. And also thank you for, right off the bat, acknowledging that this is something that's not acceptable and you're working toward it. Mr. Chair, I'll be splitting my time with my colleague, MP Kuzmirchek. Madam McIntyre, in your opening remark, you said, and I quote, "We immediately reach out to our partners at Global Affairs and National Defense to confirm the cost involved, review processes related to the flight catering, and evaluate and implement measures to improve efficiencies, ... I'd be interested to hear about when you say evaluate and implement measures to improve efficiency. Can you talk about the measures and what efficiencies were you trying to, what were you trying to improve?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for your questions. The measures that I was referring to are the measures that my colleagues are developing. Our office is supportive of anything that we can do to bring more efficiencies to these processes. So, for example, bringing down the contingency, removing choice to the passengers on the flight, looking at questions. Really, we're open to anything that we can do because we were extremely concerned when we saw these costs come out. So, for example, as Mr. Wheeler spoke about earlier, the Office of Protocol often looks at, what is the program and how it connects with the flight. Do we need to eat on the flight? Is there an option where people can eat before or after they leave so that catering doesn't need to be there? Are there additional elements that are part of the standard practice that we really don't need and that we can eliminate to have this better efficiencies when it comes to these visits? And further, what are the other ideas? Let's think outside the box. We know that these costs are increasing in the airline industry. Every Canadian is seeing that when you're booking flights. How can we follow suit? And how can we also encourage creativity and these kinds of flags from our department colleagues? That's something that we want them to do. We want to encourage that kind of rigor.
Thank you. And probably I may suggest that we establish a target or threshold by meal per flight, depending on the length. It would be a good idea. We as MPs have per diems, and we follow those to the teeth. And anything above it, it comes out of our pocket. I just leave it as that because I want to give my colleague time to be able to ask his question. MP Kazmirchik.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Chair. And actually, my colleague just asked the very question I wanted to ask, which is whether there is sort of whether officials at Global Affairs know, for example, if a cost is reasonable. So, is there a schedule of rates that can be compared? Is there a guide, for example, that guides the folks that are signing off on these decisions?
From the Global Affairs Protocol perspective, I would refer to what the General mentioned, that the complexity of factors that are in play when the final catering cost comes out. And those change for countries, for airports. And so there isn't it's not like the Treasury Board travel guidelines for a specific location. But I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that we're thinking about when we get experience with traveling to different airports, that we recognize that, okay, that's an airport that clearly gouges the state and private aircrafts because they force you to use certain caterers. Can we take that into consideration as well in the selection of which airports that we choose to go to along the way? Okay. So I think we're open to looking at all possible economies and affecting the various elements of our planning process.
But I guess my question is, can we just set up a band, for example, where we can say, you know what, this is a reasonable cost, and anything above that requires sort of an extra thought or an extra reconsideration, I think would be helpful.
That's precisely the kind of flag that I'd like our teams to be developing.
And if I, again, to add a personal experience, I actually contracted COVID on this visit and had to remain behind and quarantine in Qatar. So in terms of the Treasury Board, this came to me as a public servant. You talk about per diems for members of Parliament, and this to me gives an overall sense of the difference and the scale of price in these countries. So, for example, in Canada, the Treasury Board per diem for breakfast is $22.80. In Qatar, it is $42.77. In Doha, in UAE, it's $43. So it gives you a sense that, where you go, as the General has said, really plays an important role in determining some of these costs. But this is why asking these kinds of questions and having these kinds of process is so important to go forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. McIntyre, and happy to see that you've recovered.
It was a very unique experience.
It was hard to leave her behind.
Yes, the entire motorcade left, and I stayed behind for 11 days. But it was something that it did help me appreciate what some of the challenges are. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kazmirchuk. And it's my understanding that that ends the second round in it, but it is my understanding that there's agreement amongst quickly.
We'll let you have one. You haven't spoken.
I would have a question for General Kenny. When the Governor General went to London, how did she fly? She doesn't take commercial flights, so was there another plane? We have a list of all of the flights since December, so that one not being listed, how did she get to London? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I'm not absolutely certain, but usually it's the Challenger or the Airbus. Those are the two airplanes that we use for that purpose. I can confirm that she took the Challenger to London. It was empty, and then the Polaris was the plane that was used for the delegation. Yes, because we had to take the delegation to London. It would have cost a lot more money if we had had commercial flights with hotel rooms and so on. So my last question is about the contingency amount. What is it right now? 50%? What is that contingency for the meals? It's 20%. So how much was it before? It was changed in June. But how much was the contingency before? It was 65%. And now it's come down to 20%. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Hoos. And before I say anything more, everyone is comfortable with the questioning? Okay, great. Thank you. And my understanding is that out of respect for your offices and the time commitments that you made, that we will end the questioning at this point in time. We do appreciate you coming on such short notice and being able to be here for us, and we do appreciate that. It's nice to see you're working together, and that's what we like to see. You know, today, where in the House we had the Team Canada in the House Commons today from 50 years ago, and it makes me reflect back to 50 years ago when I was a son of a colonel who was the military attaché at the High Commission in Pakistan, and seeing the work that was being done between global affairs or foreign affairs at that time and the military, as well as at that time Her Majesty's Governor General and now to His Majesty's Governor General. And it's a great pleasure for me to be able to say that. So I like to see that work, and I really do appreciate your time here and your efforts to do that. So with that said, I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Very classy. Were you watching the meeting from your university?